Hello, welcome to the kitchen. Even though we woke up to a few inches of snow this morning covering the daffodils and the tulips, it is spring here on our small farm. And one of the first harvests that comes in the spring is a ton of eggs. So we keep a laying flock here on our small farm of a variety of chickens and also some khaki Campbell ducks. And after a winter, because of the light and because of the weather of laying not nearly as many eggs, springtime comes along with the insects and the worms and the longer days, and the result of that is a ton of eggs. I'm not always the best at preserving eggs, but this year I'm really trying to make sure that not one egg goes to waste, because last year we just ran out in the winter. We ended up having to supplement from a local farm, and I don't want to do that this year. I want to make sure that we capitalize on every harvest that we have available to us. So I want to show you how I preserve eggs and how I'm going to deal with this really beautiful glut of eggs that we have here today. We're going to be using a few methods, so let's get started. So the first method that we're going to be utilizing is just hard boiling some eggs. And this just makes them easy for us to eat for lunches, to make into egg salad, to have as a quick snack on the go. Luckily, my kids are very cooperative about eating a lot of eggs. They love them, love having them at the ready. Now, there's a lot of myths out there about hard boiling fresh eggs, hard boiling older eggs, about the peel issue. And I'm here to dispel all of that, because we use a method that results in really a perfect peel, I would say 99% of the time, and it has nothing to do with how old the egg is. All of these eggs are unwashed, as you can probably tell. They're also all at room temperature, so that's what I'm going to be starting with. Really, the secret to a good hard-boiled egg is to not boil the egg, but rather to steam it. And we do that just by adding about a ½ inch of water. Just wash this as it drips all over me. A ½ inch of water into the bottom of a pan. Okay, as you can see, I have quite a few eggs here, so I'm going to kind of sort them because we get a lot of duck eggs. They primarily only lay in the springtime. I love duck eggs for baking and for mixing into things, but my family doesn't love them just fried on their own. They have a little bit of a different taste, a little bit of a different texture. Nothing shocking. They would just prefer a chicken egg, which is fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sort, while my water's heating up here, I'm just going to sort my duck eggs into a wash bowl. And I'm going to I'm going to sort of separate some nice clean chicken eggs for hard boiling. I need another bowl, that's what I need. So some of the really nice clean chicken eggs, not all of them, but some of them will get hard boiled. And the really dirty chicken eggs that need to be washed, I'm going to stick into this wash bowl. I'm not going to be too diligent about washing the eggs because we're going to be just cracking them open. I just don't want there to be any loose debris on the outside like this that could fall into the eggs as we're freeze drying them. So I'm just kind of doing an initial sort here, deciding where I want the eggs to go. This is a great time for quality control too, if any of them have broken and gone rancid, which hopefully hasn't happened because I've been trying really hard to stay on top of it. But sometimes just, eggs get dirty. Here's the reality of life on the farm, folks. I want to wash those before I crack them, just to make sure none of that gets inside. Ooh, that one's kind of gooey. If you've never seen the difference between a chicken and a duck egg, they're fairly similar, but once you've trained your eye a little bit, you can really spot the difference. The duck egg's a little bit bigger. It has a little bit of a pointier tip that you can see there. And also the shell has a sort of a different transparency. It's almost like it's see-through just a little bit. Whereas the chicken egg is completely matte. Doesn't have I don't know, it's just different. So I can kind of spot them quickly as I'm sorting through. I'm all about preserving food, and we preserve a lot of food, but I'm really having to dial in my methods this year because the amount of time that food preservation can take is really astounding. So I'm really trying to lean into methods that are just a little bit simpler. We're, like a lot of you, we're a busy family. We have a lot going on with homeschooling and with work and with the farm. And so I tend to get a little bit resentful, especially in the summertime when it's beautiful and I want to go jump in the lake and I'm in the kitchen instead doing something. It's really important work, but it's also work that if I can streamline it and make it a little bit more effective, I'm happy to do that. So we've been getting anywhere between 15 and 24 eggs a day, which might sound like a lot, but it's really how much we use as a family. So I'm gonna leave some here. This one's broken. I don't want to use all our eggs, just in case I want to make something fabulous with them, like a choux pastry or something delicious. But I'm really just trying to keep it manageable so that no eggs get lost, because what can happen is new eggs come in from the coop, they get piled on top of the old eggs, and then before you know it, you have a bunch of old eggs at the bottom. So I keep all of our eggs at room temperature. They never get washed until I'm ready to preserve them. They just come in, get put in the basket right on the counter, and we just eat from them, just like that. This is how most eggs actually are sold, unwashed, around the world. Once you wash them, you remove that coating on the outside so oxygen can then get into the egg. So once you wash it, it has an expiration date that's a lot closer than if you just leave it unwashed. Okay. I can hear our water going now. So let's hard boil these nice clean eggs. So my water is simmering now, and the eggs are just maybe a 1/4 inch covered by water at the bottom. All right, so to perfectly hard boil an egg, when it's at room temperature, it takes 12 minutes. If you cook it for too long, nothing major is gonna happen, but it's gonna develop sort of this gray ring around the yolk. We've all seen that, and it's just not as appetizing. So 12 minutes on the money, and then once that 12 minutes is up, I immediately take those eggs and put them under cold water, and that stops the cooking process, and it keeps that yolk really nice and bright and yellow with no off gray color. So if you get that and you're not sure why, that's why. All right, I'm just gonna really run some warm water over these eggs just to loosen up any major debris. Then I'm gonna bring them back over here. We're gonna crack them all open and get them on our freeze-dry trays, because that's our second way of preserving our egg harvest. So long as the debris doesn't come off easily in your hand, it should be fine to crack the egg open. You just don't want anything that's gonna kind of float off, like little pieces of hay or straw or feathers. It's just a first step of quality control. So I know these are all fresh eggs because, like I said, I've been really trying to stay on top of this, so I've already done a few batches of it. If you're not sure if your eggs are fresh, you can take an egg and float it in a glass of water, and if it floats, it's no good. Get rid of it, compost it. If it sinks down to the bottom, it's still fresh enough to use. This is such a valuable resource of food. I mean, it's a protein source, it's a source of minerals and vitamins. It's a massive piece of our food system here on our farm because it's how we start every day. Every breakfast has eggs. So it's really important that the harvest is good and accounted for. Little piece of shell. So really, I'm just gonna keep cracking. So a lot of times you'll see the quality of an egg sort of dependent on the color of the yolk. And that can be a bit deceiving because a lot of factory farms have caught on that consumers think a really bright orange yolk is valuable. Like somehow it makes the egg healthier. And it can if the chicken is actually having an amazing diet of fresh bugs and fresh grass and all that. But unfortunately, a lot of factory farms now will feed their chickens dried marigold leaves. And that makes the yolks really bright orange, and it really doesn't affect the nutrition of the yolk at all. So it could be that the bright orange yolks are a distinction of a really healthy chicken. It could be that the chicken has also just been fed something that literally makes their yolk orange. So again, it comes back to really knowing your producer, maybe it's you, maybe it's a local farm, and seeing how their chickens are raised, because that is a way better indication of the health of the chicken and of the quality of the egg than the yolk color by itself. So I'm going to be freeze drying these eggs, and that keeps the eggs, it makes them basically a powder that you then can add water to and reconstitute into a perfect egg. Eggs for baking, eggs for scrambling, eggs for mixing into things, a frittata, anything of the sort. So I'm actually mixing my chicken and my duck eggs. You could certainly keep them separate, but since I'm going to be using these primarily for baking, I'm not that worried about it. One of our very favorite dishes that uses a ton of eggs is a dish we call puff pancake. And we make this probably once a week in our house, maybe even more, especially in the winter. I'll put a recipe for it down below the video, but it uses a dozen eggs. And it's really a little bit of salt, a little bit of sweetener, a little bit of flour, and 12 eggs, some milk, whisked together in a blender. So freeze-dried eggs are really wonderful to use for that dish. It's basically like a Dutch baby. It has 1,000 names. But we can easily use a dozen eggs in making that. So having these powdered eggs, they've kind of got a bad rap in the past, but they're really an effective way to store eggs. So it's a great way for us to be able to have these dozens of eggs on hand for the winter when we really want to make that dish a lot. If you're a part of my cooking community, you know how much I love my new little hand whisk thing. I use it all the time. So all I've done is whisk these eggs. I didn't even take the time to count how many we have here. So like I mentioned, we're gonna be freeze drying these things. We just got our freeze dryer last year and we've already used it a ton. It's completely changing the way that we preserve a lot of food culinarily for the better, because it holds it in its original state once it's reconstituted. So I've already gone ahead and done a batch in my freeze dryer because I wanted to show you what it looked like when it's done. These eggs I will set on my Harvest Right trays. So the freeze dryer that we have is a Harvest Right, and I'll make sure to put a link down below the video if you would like to check that out. It is a bit of an investment, but when you look at the amount of jars and sugar and vinegar and salt and all of these resources that go into preserving food, it actually pays for itself very quickly because we're just doing the food. We don't add anything else to it, which still kind of blows my mind. After a decade or more of preserving foods in all these different ways, to just do the food is, I don't know, it's kind of discombobulating in a way. So all I'm gonna do is put the eggs onto these trays, then carry them down very carefully to the root cellar and stick them in my freeze dryer. If you chill them in the refrigerator beforehand, it goes a lot faster. If you do them from room temperature, it takes about a day. I found that my freeze dryer with these 4 trays will hold about 7 dozen eggs, between 7 and 8, depending on how full you fill them. If you stick the trays in the freezer before they go in the freeze dryer, it goes even faster, a little bit more helpful. The eggs don't kind of puff up like they'll do if you do room temperature. But you've got some freedom there. If you don't have a freeze dryer, you can also get the eggs to this state and instead just put them in some freeze-safe Tupperwares and stick them right in your deep freeze. The problem that we have had with this is that our freezer space is really more valuable in terms of meat. So we run out of space really quickly when we're preserving dozens and dozens and dozens of eggs. So this is a much more effective way for us to preserve our eggs in terms of just storage and resources. All right, so I'm gonna carry these down very carefully. The load of eggs is in the freeze dryer. We'll check on that in a little while. The hard-boiled eggs are done, so I want to show you how I peel them really easily. So a lot of times after I hard-boil a large batch of eggs, this is something I got from my grandma. She would always put an X on the egg, so she knew which one were hard-boiled. Sometimes when we get a broken egg or just squished a little bit, I'll store it in the refrigerator. So this way the kids know which one to grab from the refrigerator. And that's just like as easy of a snack as it gets. But when you're ready to eat one, we give it a little tap and just kind of roll it with your hand, just like so. So these are fresh eggs. These were collected this morning, which means they were laid in the last 24 hours. And I want to show you how easily it peels, just like so. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with the freshness of the egg, it has to do with the method of cooking. So there's no gray ring on the outside. It's fresh and delicious and beautiful. Flake sea salt is my favorite, and Georgia is hovering behind Stuart because she wants one, so I'm going to pass this off. Thank you. So we can preserve eggs through cooking them. I know a lot of you preserve your eggs in a lime solution in glass jars. That's a great way to do it. I try to not, again, take up that much room in the root cellar with those, so this is a much better method for us. You can also, of course, freeze your eggs. They freeze well. But I want to show you, if you do have a freeze dryer and you end up getting your beautiful little egg powder here, which is really what it looks like. Sort of deceiving because if you touch it, it feels oily, like it's fatty, which it is, it's eggs. I'm going to show you how simple it is to reconstitute this and bring it back to just really normal egg status. So an average egg weighs 50 to 55 grams. So if you're wanting to, let's say a baking recipe calls for 2 eggs, you're looking at 100 to 110 grams of egg. So to reconstitute your freeze-dried eggs, you're going to add in equal parts egg and water. I use my kitchen scale for everything. So you literally just scoop in we'll do 50 grams of egg. Almost there. Once you get used to it, you'll just keep this measurement in your head. It's like when I'm making pasta. And we're going to add water right up to 100. Give it a whip. Oops, don't spill it, Shay. Give it just a minute to rehydrate. I'm going to add just a dash more water. And you can now scramble this, make it like an omelet, use it for a frittata, or just add it to your baking recipe if you're making cupcakes. It's really just like a normal egg. And speaking of, I think we should make a quick omelet for lunch. This is one of my very favorite ways to use spring eggs. Spring eggs are just the freshest, most delicious eggs. In the summertime, we get really hot here, and the eggs are nice, but not as nice as spring eggs. And in the fall, it sort of starts to taper down a bit. And of course, in the winter, the chickens, they get all dirty. They're just different. You just gotta celebrate the getting while the getting's good, and it's the best in spring. So quick omelets are a fast food in our house. I have 2 eggs here whipped up from my freeze-dried eggs. I'm gonna whip up 2 fresh eggs, and we're gonna make 2 omelets side by side and enjoy them both. I hope you have a beautiful egg harvest this year, and it's a beautiful egg season wherever you are.